Welcome to Newsmakers, a co-production between the Epoch Times and NTD. I'm your host, Joshua Phillip.
And I'm Tiffany Meyer.
Now, we begin with the collapse of top crypto exchange FTX. Disgraced FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried is set to appear before Congress amid suspicions of potential money laundering or other financial crimes that may have taken place within the company.
Of particular interest is the large donations to both the Republican and Democratic parties. Sam Bankman-Fried was second only to George Soros in his donations to the Democratic Party. FTX was also one of the featured firms working on donations to Ukraine.
This has raised questions on whether money given to Ukraine found its way back to politicians who helped get the funds in the first place. Is FTX also on the track to be the next Lehman Brothers?
And on top of all of that, what about the investors, many of whom watched millions of dollars dissolve in front of their eyes? Here's the New York Times' Andrew Ross Sorkin reading a letter to Sam Bankman-Fried from one such investor.
Can you ask him why his hedge fund was leveraging long all of these S coins? I'm going to keep it polite for the kids. Please ask him if he thinks what happened was fraud. These are the kinds of letters that I've been getting repeatedly over the past several days. What do you tell this man?
Yeah, I'm deeply sorry about what happened.
And there you have it, an apology in exchange for one's life savings.
Now, when it comes to the congressional investigation on Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, questions are also swirling on whether or not some of the committee investigating him might have some conflicts of interest. Now, that's in regard to Maxine Waters, chairwoman of the House Financial Services Committee, saying in a tweet on December 2nd, thanking Sam Bankman-Fried for him being, quote, candid in your discussions about what happened at FTX. Your willingness to talk to the public will help the company's customers, investors, and others.
And joining us to help make sense of all of this is Congressman Bill Huizenga, a member of the House Financial Services Committee.
Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Now, crypto juggernaut FTX's collapse. Some of us think this is another Bernie Madoff. FTX's CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, tweeted he'd testify before the House Financial Services Committee. Now, is he going to testify? And if yes, what do you plan on asking him?
Well, yes, we have a hearing that is December 13. It is my understanding he is not going to be there. If that changes, great. And at the end of the day, this looks like it was the worst business practices of Enron and the Bernie Madoff situation, and they got together, and the product was Sam Bankman-Fried. It's got all the hallmarks of both bad business decisions as well as fraud. So, I'm going to ask very similar questions, but I also want to put as to what Andrew Ross Sorkin was reading. But I also want to ask specifically, what was the work being done behind the scenes with the Securities and Exchange Commission, for example? I want to know what those conversations were. Because SBF, as he's referred to, was seemingly and looking like he was trying to cut a deal and create a sort of a regulatory environment that would be beneficial to him, not necessarily to the technology or to the rest of the crypto world. So those are the kinds of things that I think he is going to have to answer to on top of those fraud questions.
And Congressman, we're talking about billions of dollars that went missing. So what went wrong for FTX?
Yeah. Well, let's start with no board of directors, no accountability, no accounting standards, clearly commingling of funds. I mean, there's a myriad of things. That's the bad business practice side, right? Where clearly you had a decision to not put in the normal business practices that would ensure that that return is happening for investors. Now, I talked to some other folks who have been involved in this, And they were telling me that when he was asked about not having a board of directors, he told this person, quote, "That's insulting that you would ask me that question." Well, that's not how business works, and certainly not how a regulated business works. And I want to make sure we have as light of a touch as possible. But when you set the business practices aside, you have to ask yourself, the commingling, the looking like the Ponzi scheme of Bernie Madoff, it just has all those hallmarks. And so was this just outright fraud from Sam Bankman-Fried? And I can't come up with an answer other than yes at this point.
Pretty serious stuff. You know, Sam Bankman-Fried, he was also a major political donor, you know, mostly to Democrats, although he claims he also donated to Republicans under the radar. Now, some are calling FTX a political money laundering scheme. This is one of the big conversations around it. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and those questions need to be asked. You read the tweet from our chair, Maxine Waters, who's going to be the presumably ranking member, no longer chair. Thank you. That was less than a shall we say ringing sort of accountability statement from her, and I think there's a reason. You know, there's stories and rumors about her spending time down in the Bahamas with him, and you know, with the Bahamian authorities that were supposed to be the oversight of this. So you know, there's a lot of questions that have not been answered that need to be asked. And I don't care where those chips fall, regardless of the party side. Those are the tough things that we need to understand. But clearly, his lean was to the left and the hard left, and who he bankrolled. So you know, $38 million was the second behind George Soros in total dollars that went into the Democrat Party in this past election.
And Congressman, speaking of Maxine Waters, is it a conflict of interest, or should we be concerned about her overseeing this investigation?
Well, she's not going to be overseeing it come January 3. The Republicans are going to be in control. And in fact, Patrick McHenry, who is our ranking member now, this evening was named chair. So he is going to be controlling that. We and the rest of the leadership team are going to be involved and engaged in that. So she is going to have some element of this, and I'm frankly glad that we're starting to get the ball rolling with the first conversation here on December 13. But we're not going to let Maxine Waters or anybody else get in the way of asking these questions and getting answers.
You know, a lot of questions we still have to answer about FTX. You know, I know you and others are going to be asking these questions. As it currently stands, though, you know, why should people care about FTX? You know, for the average American, what would you say the impact of this is?
Yeah, well, you know, there's two things when it comes to crypto. One is the underlying technology, that blockchain technology, which is innovative and cutting edge and is something that our society needs and is going to benefit from. Think of your medical records having greater security. Think of real estate transactions, banking, all those things. That is the innovation side of blockchain that we need. Now, the crypto side, the asset side, it's another way of holding value. If you look at that that way as holding value versus sort of a product that's going to be creating, that's very different. And what we're doing, unfortunately, because of these actions from SBF and FTX, the pall that's being thrown on the entire industry is having a negative impact because of that trust element of where people are going to go. And so what I'm afraid might happen, you're going to see an overreaction on the regulation that then stifles all of the innovation, which forces it offshore into other areas that don't regulate the way that we do here in the United States. So it's got to be a delicate balance to make sure that we are leading the world in both the innovation and the regulatory environment to make sure that we keep investors safe. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, there's some folks here, they just want to wring risk out of life in everything. And that's not the reality of it, right? I mean, we all have to make decisions based on that risk and reward measurement.
Hey, important points. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
And coming up after a break, we're joined by Charlene Carter. Charlene sued Southwest Airlines after they fired her over her pro-life beliefs, and she won. But Southwest isn't ready to concede. Find out more after the break.
Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
NTD's Capital Report. It's about getting answers, cutting through the fog of politics. It's about your questions and our chances to ask.
What is the net impact of the American? Congressman Graves, thank you for joining us.
We're speaking to those in power to find out what does this mean for the people. We're here so you're in the know.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. NTD Business. I'm Paul Green.
At The Nation Speaks, we don't just scratch the surface. We want to go wide and deep. Our viewers come away with a much richer understanding of the issues of the day. We really make a big effort to bring on different voices onto the show. We don't just talk to experts and newsmakers, which of course are extremely important, but we also want to hear from the American people. So the people who are impacted by the policies and issues that we're talking about, because what they have to say is just as important to the national conversation.
Welcome back. How would you feel if you were forced to send money to a cause you're profoundly opposed to?
Or fired from your job simply for expressing your beliefs.
Both of those things happened actually to our next guest. Charlene Carter, a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines, was forced to pay union dues, and if she didn't, she'd lose her job. But those union dues went to Planned Parenthood and other pro-abortion causes. Now, Charlene is deeply pro-life.
And when Charlene raised her objections to her union lead, she was fired.
But Charlene is a fighter, and she refused to let the union have the final say. She took Southwest to court, and she won. But the battle isn't over. Charlene now joins us to discuss her story.
Charlene, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So to begin, your legal struggle against Southwest Airlines began after you expressed your pro-life beliefs. Union dues, of which you were a member, went to pro-abortion causes like Planned Parenthood. So you voiced your objection to your union lead. Abortion is more than just a religious conviction for you, it's personal. And your money going to those causes was traumatizing. Can you explain that part?
Yes. So let me just back up a bit. So the union president took about 20 women to the Women's March in 2017, and that was also against President Trump. And the main sponsor of that was Planned Parenthood. Personally, how it affected me was when I was 19, and this is in obviously my transcripts and the court documents. But I experienced what Planned Parenthood does at 19 years old, unfortunately. So when I found out that they were actually using this money to go to this march, spend it on, food, lodging, travel, you name it, for all of these women, and then saying that they were, representing all of us as flight attendants at Southwest Airlines, meaning all of us, they weren't representing a lot of us, and I was one of them, and I complained about it.
Jeez, well, after they fired you, they did offer your job back, but it was on the condition that you basically sign your rights away, toe the party line, so to speak. You said no, you filed your lawsuit. Why'd you take that course?
Okay, so the company, what they did was it's a last chance agreement, and they wanted to silence me. They wanted a non-disclosure. They also wanted me to sign all my rights away to either sue the union or the company for basically wrongful termination. And I knew if I signed it, I'd have like a target on my back, for one, but also I'm just not going to sign my rights away on something that I'm very passionate about and I believe in. And, it's my Christian value system. I couldn't sleep with myself at night if I didn't fight. But also I couldn't allow this to happen to someone else. So I decided to, move forward with it and fight it in a different realm.
And Charlene, it seems your win against Southwest is also a win for religious freedom. And the judge went so far as to say Southwest's behavior was grossly intolerant and rewarded you back with pay, damages, and reinstatement to your job. And a ruling at Southwest is appealing to the Fifth Circuit. So what does that appeal mean for you?
Well, it's just another step in the process. We have a judicial system that there's layers to it. And, when you're fighting in a lawsuit, especially, a federal lawsuit like mine is, they have the right to go up to the Fifth Circuit and, say that the jury, got it wrong or the judge got it wrong. In this case, it was 7 jurors that decided on this case. And then he made his final ruling just 2 days ago. So, they had their opportunity within, federal court to show their side and put their evidence, up along with me. And, they just don't like the decision.
Mm-hmm. Now, how does it feel returning to the job at Southwest?
I loved my job. I was there almost 21 years when they got rid of me, and I would love to go back. I have so many friends there, and we call each other cohorts. I love flying. I love serving the passengers. I literally enjoyed my job every time I stepped foot on that airplane. And so I never had a complaint on the airplane. I was a very good flight attendant, and that was even, said in court. So this just had everything to do with what I had spoken against with my union, and it was my union president that actually turned me in and got me fired.
Wow. And Charlene, lastly, what do you think needs to change within the industry and how unions are run to ensure that employees' freedom of speech and freedom of belief are protected?
Honestly, I don't know how it's going to change because we are forced into paying them from the time that we become a flight attendant. As soon as we sign, as soon as we pass training and we're online, we have to become a member. Now, I did in 2013 renounce my membership, which means I'm a fee-based flight attendant. I still pay dues, and they use those, for this March. The only way I think that it's going to change is if we have enough members that feel like me, that are disenfranchised for the things that we believe in. We're going to have to stand up against them. And I don't know if it's because it's financial for them. How do we stop them from using our money to do things that we don't agree with? Or are they going to counter that and let us do some of the things that we, as the other flight attendants, such as a pro-life movement, they would never sponsor something like that. So, why not? Let's let those members take some money and be able to do the things that we like, and kind of counteract that. But at this point, that's not the way it's run. And that's unfortunate.
Well, Charlene, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, coming up after the break, Senior Counsel Alliance for Defending Freedom, Jake Warner. Now, he's here to discuss a case before the Supreme Court. Can the state compel your speech, or is saying no discrimination? We'll find out.
Welcome back. Can the government coerce your speech if you own a business? For example, if you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, can the government tell you to assist same-sex marriages?
Can it force you to make a cake, design a website, or otherwise compel you via your business to support something that you think is wrong?
Or is saying you won't make the cake, won't design the website, discrimination? Those are the questions the U.S. Supreme Court is weighing in a case that pits a web designer against the state of Colorado.
Now, Lori Smith, the owner of 303 Creative, sincerely believes that marriage is between a man and a woman. And she preemptively sued Colorado, saying its public accommodations mandate violates her right to free speech.
And joining us to discuss this case is Senior Counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom, Jake Warner. Jake helped prep this case and was in court during oral arguments. Jake, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So to begin, what is Colorado's public accommodations mandate?
For sure. Well, Lori Smith, she's a website designer. She owns 303 Creative. A few years ago, she wanted to expand her business and create custom websites celebrating God's design for marriage between a man and a woman. But Colorado applies its public accommodation law to force her to promote messages that go against her deepest beliefs about marriage. Colorado has made it very clear that Lori Smith is not welcome to promote her views about marriage through her custom website. So a few years ago, Lori looked around. She saw how her state was treating Jack Phillips, prosecuting and punishing him all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And she wondered, could this happen to me? So instead of facing punishment, she decided to challenge the unjust law. And unfortunately, in two courts below, the courts ruled that the state could force her to create speech promoting messages that go against her core beliefs. But earlier this year, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to hear Lori's case, and we were in court on Monday for oral arguments in that case.
Now, based on your observations, I mean, how does this violate her right to free speech?
Well, it's forcing her to say things she doesn't believe. Here at Alliance Defending Freedom, we believe that free speech is for everyone. No one should be forced to say something that they don't believe. So a win for Lori in this case would protect people who disagree with her on marriage and other issues. For example, we don't think the government should force an LGBT website designer to create custom websites criticizing same-sex marriage, nor do we think the government should force a Democrat poster creator to create posters promoting the Republican Party platform. A free speech win for Lori here is truly a win for all Americans.
And Jake, we've seen cases like this before from Colorado. Like you mentioned, the baker Jack Phillips of Masterpiece Cake Shop. In that case, the Supreme Court partially ruled for Phillips. And apparently he's back in court and sued again because he refused to make a cake. And now we're hearing this case. But this time Lori preemptively sued Colorado. So why the preemptive suit?
Well, she didn't want to face the same punishment and prosecution that Jack Phillips did. Pre-enforcement challenges are a hallmark of civil rights litigation in America, and Lori didn't want to be facing punishment before she discovered her First Amendment rights. So she challenged the unjust law so she wouldn't be another Jack Phillips.
You know, a big question too is if people want a website done and it goes against her beliefs, why can't they just use another web designer or another baker for that matter?
Yeah, briefs in the case show that there are over 200,000 web designers in the country, most of whom would be very happy to create custom websites celebrating views of marriage that, whether it's same-sex marriage or otherwise. But Lori Smith, she serves everyone, and the state of Colorado conceded this in its papers, that Lori serves everyone. Everything she creates is speech, and they claim the power to compel her speech. And we're hoping that the Supreme Court's going to uphold Lori's First Amendment right and the First Amendment right of all Americans to say what they believe without fear of government punishment.
And Jake, as you mentioned, you were present during the oral argument. So what do you think is the most likely outcome for this case?
The majority of the court was really concerned about how Colorado was applying its law. At the argument, the attorney for Colorado argued that its law could compel publishers, that it could compel newspapers, that it could compel Lori, for example, to put "God Bless This Marriage" on her custom website, celebrating views of marriage that goes against her faith. And I think a majority of the justices understood that this is a very big problem. The government is asserting massive power to crush people who they simply disagree with. And we're very hopeful that by the end of next June, we're going to have a very good decision upholding the First Amendment rights of all Americans to say what they believe without fear of being punished.
Now, in terms of the broader impact of this case for average Americans, people at home, of course, it's at the Supreme Court, meaning this applies not just people in one state, but the whole country. What does this mean for freedom of speech and freedom of religion?
Well, it has vast implications. Alliance Defending Freedom represents creative professionals and artists all around the country. For example, we have photographers as clients up and down the East Coast. We've represented filmmakers in Minnesota, calligraphers and painters in Arizona. And a win for Lori Smith at the Supreme Court would protect artists everywhere from governments misusing their public accommodation laws to force them to create speech that goes against their deepest beliefs. And like I said earlier, this is a win not just for people like Lori Smith and Jack Phillips. It's a win for all artists, no matter your views on some of life's biggest issues.
And, on that note, too, people, of course, would say, well, why should someone have the right to, let's say, go against the law that does say that you can't say it? What is your answer to that?
People like Lori Smith and Jack Phillips, they serve everyone. They just can't express every message. And the First Amendment forbids government from forcing anyone, no matter your view. It forbids the government from forcing anyone to promote a message that goes against their deepest beliefs. And that's what this case is about.
Hey, Jake, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, coming up after the break, we talk with Congressman Jim Jordan. Republicans have control of the House starting in 2023. What's their plan? Now, Representative Jordan will tell us about this. Stay tuned for that. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The Epoch Times is independent. We're not controlled by any special interest, and we never will be. This is a battle between truth and deceit. A battle between forces that would ensnare this country in ignorance and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. Subscribe today to our digital edition at theepochtimes.com and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. Read the difference on all your devices. We'd love to have you on board.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
Welcome back to Newsmakers. For the past 4 years, Democrats have controlled the House, and they've used that control to launch investigation after investigation into President Trump and his allies.
The tables are turning in January. Republicans gained control of the House in the midterm elections. Now they're ready to launch their own investigations.
That's right, and it looks like investigations are here to stay. But instead of focusing on Trump, Republicans plan to go after President Biden, Dr. Fauci, and his COVID dealings, and of course Hunter Biden and his infamous laptop.
Now, to get a better idea of what's going on with the Republican agenda for this in 2023, I sat down early with Congressman Jim Jordan. Now, he serves as the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee. Here's what he had to say. Hey, Congressman, thanks for being here.
You bet. Good to be with you, Josh.
Now, you know, on the surface, we're hearing a lot about Republicans and whether they're going to be launching their own investigations with the House. We've been hearing mixed things. Are Republicans going to be launching their own investigations now they control the House? Where are things at with this?
No, we definitely are. Part of our constitutional duty is to get the facts and the truth to the American people. And there are a host of issues where we feel like we haven't got the truth out there. The American people haven't got all the information that they're entitled to have, whether it's the whole misinformation the government gave us about COVID. You know, it's interesting, the Biden administration likes to talk about misinformation, disinformation, when in fact they're the biggest purveyors of providing false information to the American people. And you can just look no further than the whole COVID issue and things Dr. Fauci told us. Of course, there's the Hunter Biden and Biden family business operations going on that Mr. Comer's indicated he's going to look into. And then we think this political nature now, this political politicization of the Justice Department, based on the fact that we've had 14 agents come to us as whistleblowers, we think that has to be examined because, you know, we live in the greatest country in the world, Josh, but America's not America if you have a Justice Department that's not treating people equally under the law, and that's exactly what we have now.
Let's get into that in a sec. I want to talk about Hunter Biden first. One of the big questions people have is, does Hunter Biden's actions reflect on Joe Biden?
Right.
Could we say that Joe Biden is being compromised through the actions of Hunter? Do we have any evidence on this? What are you looking for with this?
Well, it looks like that could be the case, but what we want to see, and Mr. Comer, who will be the chairman of the Oversight Committee, has indicated he wants to see these 150 suspicious activity reports. So most Americans never heard the term suspicious activity reports. These are actual reports that financial institutions file with the Treasury Department when they see suspicious activity. Typically, it's money laundering type of activity. Most Americans don't get these, or if they do, there's a good reason for it. But there's 150 of them on Hunter Biden and Jim Biden, the president's brother. So, I mean, that to me is a big concern. And then broader in this story is the collusion that took place between big government, big tech, to keep this information. This is where it has a judiciary component, to keep this information from we, the people, just days before the most important election we have, which is the election for president of the United States. So that's the angle we're going to look at on the Judiciary Committee. And we'll be working with Chairman Comer and the things he wants to look at in that suspicious activity reports to see if, the answer to your question, to see if the president himself may in fact be compromised.
Tell us about these suspicious activity reports. You said there's 150 of them.
Yeah.
Is there anything public on this? And if not,
only two.
What are these?
Only two have been made public, and what they show, and the bank files them because it looks suspicious, because they're seeing money move from this bank to this bank and then to this person and that, and it looks suspicious. Maybe it's a large amount of money, so that's why they get filed. And there's only been two that the committee's had access to, but it's the committee's understanding, the Oversight Committee's understanding, that there are 148 others. And that's what Mr. Comer really is trying to get a hold of. Now, whether the Biden administration will used to be, before the Biden administration, if a committee wanted to see that information, whether it was Democrats on the committee or Republicans on the committee, they could have access to it until the Biden administration. So the Biden administration hasn't complied with any of the correspondence, any of the letters and requests that came from Ranking Member Comer. They've changed the policy on suspicious activity reports, the ability of committees to review that information. And of course, they've also now, the Democrats have set up this group to go after anyone who investigates the Biden administration. That all kind of looks suspicious in and of itself. So we'll see if we get access. Maybe we're going to have to go to the banks to get that information and not through the Treasury Department.
Well, and that brings us up another point, because a lot of the things the public is looking at is they see Democrats going very aggressive on the investigations when it comes to the House. Now, the Republicans have it. They were wondering, of course, will you do the same? One of the big questions also is, how strong will they go? Look, Democrats are putting people in jail, trying to get them with contempt for refusing to show this kind of information. Will Republicans take it that far as well?
Well, we're going to do these investigations in a way that's consistent with the Constitution, consistent with our duty and the oath we take when we get sworn into the new Congress on January 3rd. So we're going to do it that, but we're going to be aggressive. I mean, you have to be if you want to get the facts and the truth. Now, we can't prosecute anyone. All we can do is do the work that needs to be done, do the work that is part of our constitutional duty, and get the truth, get the facts, get all the information to we the people, to the American citizens, so they can take a look at this and say, wow. Because my premise is, and I think all the evidence supports it, and the 14 whistleblowers who've come talk to us certainly support this. I think that, as an example, that the Justice Department is in fact operating in a political fashion. They are not administering justice equally under the law. I think they're operating in a political way. So, but we're gonna get the facts and the truth and prove that to the American people. I think it's already pretty obvious, but we really want to show that in a host of other issues as well. We want to get the truth and the facts to the country.
Well, and that point as well, you do mention that you are planning to investigate as well through the House the politicization of the Justice Department. You said you have whistleblowers stepping forward. I assume you can't tell us everything, but what is the nature of what they're telling you?
I'll give you the very first one. Came to us a little over a year ago. We had this whole issue of the Justice Department setting up this apparatus to target moms and dads who go to school board meetings and speak up for their son or daughter. And this whole thing that was set up where they were using counterterrorism measures against parents, against moms who showed up at a school board meeting to express their concern about the curriculum or the mask mandates or whatever else the school was doing. And over 24 parents, because of this whistleblower came to us, we know that over 24 parents were reported on the snitch line that Merrick Garland set up and investigated by our FBI. None of them found guilty of any crime. But just the chilling impact that has when you do that. So that was the first one. We've had others come and talk to us about the focus on labeling all cases as domestic violent extremism cases when in fact they're not. We've had this idea that they're trying to purge agents. One agent even said at the highest levels of the FBI at the Washington field office that it is, quote, rotted to the core. That's pretty interesting line of interesting statement about the FBI that this individual works for. So we think it's been political, and we're gonna do everything we can to make sure we can show that.
And Congressman, 20 seconds left. If you were to tell the American people one thing about where Republicans are going with these investigations, what would you tell them? Why are these necessary?
It's all about the truth. It's all about the truth. America is not America if you don't have a Justice Department that is fairly and equally administering the law. That's how it's supposed to work in our great country. There's due process. You have First Amendment liberties, Second Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights. I mean, when it's done in a political fashion, that is wrong, and you can't have the government being weaponized against the very people it's supposed to serve. That, unfortunately, is what I think we have now. That's why we're going to get the truth so that we can stop it.
Hey, Congressman, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
You bet, Josh. Take care.
And joining us after the break, Akash Chogli, Vice President of Americans for Prosperity. He's here to discuss the latest budget showdown in Washington. You don't want to miss it.
NTD's Capitol Report. It's about getting answers. Cutting through the fog of politics. It's about your questions and our chances to ask.
What is the net impact of the American? Congressman Graves, thank you for joining us.
We're speaking to those in power to find out what does this mean for the people. We're here so you're in the know.
Freedom is not free, and neither is the truth. In order to bring you the facts, our reporters are out there on the front lines getting the true story. Some of them served 10 years of prison in China. We've been censored on social media. Our Hong Kong printing offices were set on fire, and we've been repeatedly attacked by the Chinese Communist Party. But no matter what, we believe that you deserve the truth, and so we'll continue to bring the truth to light. Head on over to getepic.com and try honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased. and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Welcome back. Now, the clock is ticking on a spending bill to fund the government past December 16th, but Republicans and Democrats don't see eye to eye. Shocking, I know.
On that note, Democrats want to pass a bill that funds the government through fiscal year 2023, but Republicans don't. They want a short-term funding bill and to revisit spending when they take control of the House in January.
Now, Democrats have the numbers in the House to pass whatever bill they want, but they need at least 10 Republicans to support the bill in the Senate. If they can't get the support for the bill, it dies.
So is the government headed toward a partial shutdown, or will Congress figure it out before? Joining us now to discuss the spending bill showdown is Akash Chogli. Akash is the Vice President of Americans for Prosperity. Akash, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
To begin, Democrats want one thing and Republicans want another. So what's going on with this spending bill?
Well, what's going on is the same thing that's happened for the last 25 years, which is that regular budget order simply hasn't happened. We should not be in a situation at the end of every year where either the government shuts down or they have this must-pass bill with everything jammed in it all at once. What should happen is throughout the year, there are 12 different appropriations bills. Congress debates them, they can see what's in them, take things out, and so on. That simply hasn't happened. That's why we're in this terrible situation where it's either a shutdown or one of these Christmas tree bills, as we like to say. What we need isn't just to say which side is right or wrong in this instance, but really to overhaul the entire system because it simply is no longer working.
Well, and that's what happens, as you mentioned, just about every year. They say the government's going to shut down, there's things being passed in the bill. What are some of the things in this bill that maybe don't belong there that we don't know about so far?
Well, we have yet to see. They're still debating it, right? So, we're literally getting down to the 24th hour here. And that's part of the problem, is that we don't know exactly what's in here. What we do know is it's going to be a huge spending bill. It has to be, right? It has literally everything that the discretionary budget has in it will be in this bill. But in addition, it's likely to have pet projects for districts and things that we won't even know about for weeks, months, potentially even years later after bills like this are rammed through. Now, going back to those 12 appropriations bills, your question is answered, right? One of the beauties of the budget process as it is supposed to work is that each bill is debated on its own. The committees can dive into it. They can take things out. They can amend them. The Senate can amend it and so on. There's simply no opportunity to do that with these must-pass bills because nobody wants a government shutdown. And so you're in this bad position even if you're a fiscal conservative and you want to rein in spending, you want the troops to get paid, you want government to function, and so you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and there's simply no winning.
And Akash, on the note of spending, I think you've said before that Democrats are basically lighting money on fire, and that's fueling inflation. So what do you see happening with Democrats and spending?
I don't think they have any plans to change course. President Biden was asked the day after the election when, even though his party overperformed, it certainly looked like Republicans were poised to take the House. He was asked what he would change. His answer was nothing. One word, nothing. And that just shows a huge disconnect between this administration and Washington and where the country is. Elections don't always necessarily reflect the entirety of the picture that the American people are facing. As you both know, there's a lot that goes into somebody's decision of how they vote. But 80% of the country thinks the country is headed in the wrong direction. Grocery prices are still high. We're headed for high healthcare costs, high education costs, high housing costs. And yet the president has signed nearly $5 trillion of spending into action this year. The one thing that'll change with the Republican House is there will be no more of these partisan $2 trillion spending bills like the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Plan. Those days are over, but it is clear that we need to overhaul the budget process. And hopefully that's something that House Republicans can lead on, even to set a signal if it doesn't become law, just a signal to the American people that they're looking to do things differently.
I know we often hear about Democrats and overspending, but some people say Republicans are guilty as well. What do you say about that?
They are absolutely right. I think many of your viewers may like many of the things that President Trump did, but he made clear that controlling spending simply wasn't a priority of his administration. He said from day one he wasn't going to touch Medicare and Social Security, which are the major drivers of our $30 trillion national debt. It is, in fact, possible to rein in our national debt, to control spending and preserve those programs for people who rely on them. There is no willingness to do it under the Trump administration. Going back to the Bush administration, the same thing. Congress under Paul Ryan, for all his rhetoric about caring about spending, he wasn't able to do very much. And so really since 2010, 2011 was the only time there were even small gains made to control federal spending. And I think I would encourage your viewers to make it a priority again as they contact their members of Congress. Congress has no reason to care about reining in spending unless they're hearing from their constituents that it matters.
Well, Akash, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us after the break, Brigadier General Robert Spalding, who's also an Epoch Times contributor and a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. He's here to talk about the protests across China and whether the economic state there is being felt in our pocketbooks here. We'll find out more after the break. Welcome back to Newsmakers. White pieces of paper, a symbol of hope and protest.
Now, it's been over a week and the protests across China have not died down. Some people are calling for freedom, others are calling for an end to the zero COVID policy.
And it seems on that second front, the authorities are listening. Some of the restrictions have been loosened. But was it really the result of the protests? Are authorities backing down, or are other factors at play?
Now, to help us understand what's happening there and how it affects us here, Epoch Times contributor Brigadier General Robert Spalding joins us now. Hey, General Spalding, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Now, General, China has loosened some of the COVID restrictions in the country. Reports are saying this is in response to the widespread protests. Others are saying it has nothing to do with that. It's about the economy, impact of the zero COVID policies. What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, it has zero to do with the economy. If it had anything to do with the economy, you wouldn't have seen the destruction that she waged across the tech industry, whether it be Alibaba or Didi Dacha. I mean, all of those face challenges. Even Ant Group, who was going to have the biggest IPO on record, was denied that IPO. So don't think of it in terms of she cares about the economy. He also doesn't care about health. So zero COVID is not about protecting Chinese people's health. What zero COVID is about is seeing how far the Chinese Communist Party can go in terms of controlling the population. So while they may have released some of the restrictions, it's really them trying to fine tune where the sweet spot is in terms of how much control will the Chinese people accept. And that allows them to then refine their control so they can, what they're looking for here is automated control of their population, getting them to voluntarily do the things that the Chinese Communist Party wants them to do. And that's a combination of pressure and rewards. And so they're trying to fine tune that right now. COVID was really about them figuring out how far they can take it.
On that note about fine-tuning the policies, it seems in terms of the economic impact in China, while the people might be accepting of this approach, what about the manufacturers and Western companies who are seeing their supply chains dry up there? How is it affecting them?
Forget about the economy. She does not care about the economy. They're going back to the pre-Deng Xiaoping hide and bide. This is all about ideology. The fact that Wang Huning is on the standing committee means, and all the others like Liu He are gone. Anybody that had anything to do with Western economics are gone. These are all ideologues, and they're all loyal to Xi. So Xi is a Marxist-Leninist, and he's bringing back the ideological aspect that Mao had of the Chinese Communist Party prior to the failure of the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward, you know, all their 5-year plans that were failed and ended up in tens of millions of starvations. They are bringing back that type of ideological aspect to the Chinese Communist Party. So the businesses, the financial institutions, all that were getting rich off of China, they need to forget about this stuff because it's not coming back. Xi is very clear when he talks to the party. He says, we are going to be about ideology. That's how the Soviet Union failed, and we're not going to do that.
Well, in important points, especially when it comes to what's happening now, we're seeing really human rights abuses. The CCP, interestingly, did back off that a little bit, suggesting maybe they were afraid of the noise of the crowd, so to speak. But for businesses that are still American businesses still operating in China, what does this mean for them? Should they get out? Should they stay? What does this mean for our businesses there?
Well, they absolutely should get out. As I've been saying, they're going to lose their assets. They're losing their business. All of that they thought, they had this great partner in China that they were focused on getting rich. That was the past. That was Deng Xiaoping. That was Jiang Zemin, who just died at 96. That was Hu Jintao, who got forced walked out of the Consultative Congress. So all of that is gone. It's been swept under the rug by Xi Jinping. And all you have now is ideology. And I don't know how to say it any clearer. Xi Jinping doesn't care about American businesses, doesn't care about American businessmen or women, doesn't care about investment. He cares about ideology. And that's why, he basically wiped out all factions, other factions of leadership, in terms of, you have the Shanghai faction that was with Jiang Zemin, you had the Hu Jintao's faction. They're gone. He fired all of those people. The Chinese Communist Party is firmly in Xi Jinping's control, and they are firmly about ideology. And Wang Huning, and this is the thing that I don't understand, why are people not paying attention that Wang Huning's on the standing committee? He is the brains behind the ideology that is known as Xi Jinping thought.
In general, on this point about the ideology, how is that going to impact us here? How is this going to change the U.S.-China relations?
Well, I think it's just going to amplify things like TikTok that are meant to, remember, ByteDance signed documents that says they will ensure that their algorithms comply to the Chinese Communist Party concept of a good citizen. In other words, TikTok, whose algorithms, ByteDance power, is going to influence not just, folks outside of the borders, but folks within the United States in terms of what the Chinese Communist Party, how they want them to think, how they want them to behave. This is the challenge that we face. It is about using the tools of Silicon Valley that they have co-opted so that they can influence, other populations, not just the Chinese. They use the TikTok version in China of Douyin. Douyin is used to make the Chinese people patriotic, make them productive. TikTok is made to make Americans and other cultures less productive, and to use that to influence them to want the China model.
Hey, General, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And that's all from us tonight here on Newsmakers. We'll be back next Wednesday night with a brand new show. See you then.
Have a good night, folks.